Good morning and welcome to Heartland Dual Sport. Thank you so much for tuning in. We were recently asked by several people if we'd kind of do a comparison between the KLR and the Honda Africa Twin, since we've actually had both of them here in the garage at the same time. So that's what the video will be about today. Let's go ride, guys. Thought it might be kind of fun to start out with a little bit of the history of the Honda Africa Twin. And some of this information I actually got off of Google, so it'll be, basically if we're doing credits, the credits are going to have to go to the Google search. But possibly the most reliable and versatile adventure touring bike ever made is a quote from Google on the Honda Africa Twin. In 1984, Honda and the HRC decided to make a motorcycle with one purpose in mind, and that was to compete in a long-distance race. The NXR750 was one of the first water-cooled motorcycles to win the rally race. The XRV650 was another one of the models, and they stopped selling it in 2003. Africa Twin was brought back to the table, and it was built with the 2016 release date in mind. The KLR. The KLR was developed in 1987, and its intended purpose was to be used for paved and unpaved roads. It is a water-cooled motorcycle that has been widely used as an inexpensive adventure bike. It has remained virtually unchanged until 2007. 2008 they changed a few things, and then in 2015 they changed the springs and the suspension. It's supposed to be a lot better built. The suspension is supposed to be much better now than the KLRs of the past. We'll kind of go over a few pros and cons on the KLR as well. Some of the pros about the KLR: a brand new one with a warranty. It actually does good on the mileage. It is a great bike. The newer one with the better suspension that they're making today actually is much better for both types of road and off-road type driving. The bike will do almost anything that you ask it to do without complaint. It is a proven bike. It has traveled all over the world. You can go on a long haul, and the price of it makes it very affordable. Some of the cons on the KLR. The KLR doesn't do one thing great. It is not great in the dirt. It's not great on the street. But again, the bike will do virtually anything that you ask it to do. So that makes it a great bike to have. The Honda Africa Twin. With Honda's technology at work, it does a great job on the highway. It does okay in the twisties, but the larger front wheel does not allow it to cut the corners like a super sport. Of course, this bike was not meant to be a super sport. However, the engine that they put in the Honda Africa Twin makes it feel like a super sport in some ways. When you get on the throttle, you know that you're on a bike that has 94.5 horsepower. And that's a huge difference between it and the KLR's, I believe, claimed 40 or 45 horsepower, and you guys that are KLR gurus will be able to correct me if I'm wrong, but it's somewhere in that 40 to 45 horsepower claimed. The Africa Twin does great in both dirt. Its power delivery and traction control can help you dial down your horsepower for the dirt and the torque control. The Africa Twin also comes with the ABS, and it can be disabled when you go off in the dirt. A lot of times that's one of the complaints with the guys is when you're in the dirt, you're going to be sliding that rear wheel around sometimes, making tight corners and stuff like that, and you can actually disable the ABS, and it's a real easy push of the button type deal. It's not like you have to go through a programming mode or a bunch of things. I mean, they've made it really simple. You've got a trigger type setting on the clutch side of your handlebars to adjust the traction control, and Honda calls theirs the torque control. And then again, you can turn the ABS off really easy by a push of a button up on the control panel. I keep calling it a control panel, but I'm sure that I'm going to get dinged for that. It's actually a cockpit, but you guys know what I'm saying. One of the pros about the Honda Africa Twin is actually a double-edged sword. It costs significantly more than the KLR, but when you compare the cost of the Africa Twin in comparison to bikes or other adventure bikes in the 800 to 1000 cc range, it's actually more affordable. With the bike being fuel injected, it's actually going to be another pro over the KLR, which is a carbureted engine. The fuel injection you're not going to have to mess with if you're going up and down the mountains. Sometimes that's a significant factor in the KLR, is whether or not to have a bike rejetted depending on where you're going to be going and spending your next adventure. It's things like that the Africa Twin being fuel injected, it makes it a much easier choice when you're going to be going, say, up to Colorado and ride up in the mountains or something like that. The fuel injection is a huge perk. And one of the cons that I believe is very similar with the Africa Twin is exactly one of the same cons with the Kawasaki KLR650. Both of them come with what I would consider pretty goofy foot pegs, considering they were meant to be an adventure bike. The foot pegs are just really pretty much goofy. I mean, they should have actually put something a little better on both bikes, in my personal opinion, but that is a con, and that's going to be a con for both bikes, not just the Honda Africa Twin, because both of them need upgraded foot pegs. When you start talking about the performance differences between the KLR and the Africa Twin, right off the bat, one pro could be a con as well. The KLR weighs roughly 430 pounds, and the Africa Twin with the standard transmission weighs roughly 511 pounds. This is both a pro and a con. The KLR, if you lay it over, is going to be easier to pick up being a lighter bike, but that lighter bike is also not going to handle as well on the crosswind days. As a lot of y'all know, here in Oklahoma, it's extremely windy. A lot of the times we have 20-mile-an-hour winds sometimes blowing for weeks at a time, not just one afternoon. That 432 pounds in a crosswind actually blows you around a little bit more than the Africa Twin, being at 511 pounds. It can actually hold its stance a little bit better in the crosswind situation. The brakes on the KLR are 280 millimeter, and the Africa Twin has 310 millimeter dual disc brakes. So the stopping power on the Africa Twin is actually quite a bit more than what you're going to get on the KLR. And an emergency type situation, that's going to be great. The Africa Twin also has, as mentioned earlier, the ABS, which also is going to be great when you get into one of those all crud factors and you're actually stomping on the brakes harder than you should. The Africa Twin should not be locking up the rear wheel, which generally is one of the biggest problems with people right before a crash, or sometimes it leads up to a crash. Is sliding rear wheel in a panic situation. It just creates another hazard in and of itself. I believe Honda did a really good job making this bike with the ABS, and again, there is a huge price difference between the KLR and the Africa Twin, but I was asked to do a comparison video, and that's part of what, you know, there's pros and cons to both. In a real world situation, I believe the Africa Twin is a much better bike for 2-up. With it having quite a bit more horsepower, you're going to be able to carry a passenger easier up a hill or down a hill or up a mountain or down a mountain than the KLR. The Africa Twin is going to do better on the highway simply because it does weigh a little bit more. The Africa Twin is still not going to be a super sport. It's not going to be carving through the tail of the dragon like you would on a R6 or a sport bike that's built for that kind of thing. But you do get the feel when you get behind the wheel of the Africa Twin that when you pull on that throttle or roll that throttle on, you can actually feel the horsepower, and that's quite a bit of difference between it and the KLR. The KLR does a good job riding 2-up. Me and Angie were able to ride it around several times, and the Africa Twin, the way the seat is built, she sets up a little bit higher, so when you're riding with a passenger, you don't get that constant banging of the heads where, you know, in between shifts and or braking. There's a little bit better gap there for riding two up, for especially if you're riding up with a passenger who hadn't ridden a lot, who doesn't know everything about the bike. It just makes it easier because she can sit there without banging your head or helmet into your helmet. So that's actually a big perk on the. And one more thing with that, with the seat being just a hair higher for the passenger, the foot pegs are also a little bit lower on the Africa Twin, so that the seating position for your passenger is much better. And for you guys that are coming from sport bikes or have had sport bikes in the past, you know what I'm talking about. The girl's legs are always, they're cram jammed right up underneath her, almost like she's squatting, and that doesn't make for a very comfortable ride for your passenger. And the Africa Twin, I believe they've done a much better job setting the bike up for a passenger than the KLR. And again, some of the mechanics and the ergonomics of the KLR and the Honda Africa Twin are similar. They both have 21-inch front tires. The KLR actually has a 17-inch rear wheel, and the Africa Twin has the 18-inch. The KLR has a 650cc motor, and the Africa Twin has the 998cc motor. The KLR, again, I believe the claimed horsepower is 42, and the Honda Africa Twin, I believe, is 94. One area that the KLR actually beats the Honda Africa Twin to death on is the fuel capacity. The KLR has a 5.8 gallon tank, which is actually pretty awesome. The Africa Twin is 4.96. I think they could have made that tank a little bit bigger. It probably would have helped it in the long road adventures, but 4.96 at 50 some odd miles a gallon is still a pretty good fuel range. And most of the time for me here in Oklahoma, if you're not going to be 250 miles away from a gas station. It's just, we have a lot more gas stations. Now you get out somewhere, and I haven't experienced it yet, but we may get out somewhere on one of our lengthy adventures, and that may become problematic. So I don't know. We do have a roto pack on the DRZ, so I'm already making plans to figure out a way to mount the roto pack on the Africa Twin, just in case it's needed down the road for some of our long adventures that we already have planned. And then along with the frame and the way the bike's set up, the ground clearance on the KLR is 8.3 inches, and the Africa Twin is 9.8 inches. With that said, the seat height on the KLR is 35 inches, and the seat height on the Africa Twin is 34.3 inches. I want to stop right here for a minute and just kind of take a break to explain. The Honda engineers and the HRC team that worked on building the Africa Twin actually put quite a bit of thought into the seat height of the Africa Twin. The original seat height setting is 34.3 inches, as mentioned earlier. It also has, with the same seat, a lower seat height, which brings it down around 1 more inch. And then you can buy an additional seat, which they call their low seat, which brings it down another inch. So roughly, with the new low seat, you'd be in that 32-inch range on the seat height. Steve, as you guys know, has been riding with me a little bit, and he has just recently purchased the low seat. So we will be doing a video here shortly, and hopefully we can get that done maybe in the next week or so. And I'm hoping to get somebody over here who's a little bit shorter, because that's one of the questions that's been asked by a few people as well. I believe one of the guys asked me about 5'7", I believe is his height, and he was asking about the possibilities of being able to hold the bike upright. So my plan is to find somebody that's 5'7", get Steve over here with his low seat height, and we'll just kind of do a comparison. And I understand, a lot of it's going to depend on the guy's inseam on his leg length, but we can at least get a really good idea of a shorter guy on the Honda Africa Twin and kind of do a comparison. With that said, we've ordered a 2-inch lowering kit for the KLR, because Steve is the guy who actually bought my KLR. He bought it for his son, so that his son would be able to ride it. And his son, I believe, is around 5'6", so he may end up being the guy we use. But we're going to go ahead and lower the KLR with the lowering links that he's already purchased for it, and we'll be able to kind of show you a comparison of things you can do on the KLR to lower it. I'm sure at some point there's going to be a lowering kit for the Honda Africa Twin. I haven't seen it yet, but I'm sure it will happen in time. But I just thought it was pretty awesome that the Honda Racing, or that Honda had the forethought of trying to build this bike for multiple sized people, especially with it being an adventure bike. And we know that every year there's more and more ladies who are involved in the sport as well. So the factory spending the time to actually show the difference in the seats height and the availability of adjusting the seat height without messing with your suspension, I think is actually pretty awesome, because a lot of times your older bikes, you pretty much had to cut foam out of the seat to lower it, and then you're going to be giving up some comfort for seat height. The Africa Twin, this is something that they thought about while they was building it, and they've made it to where it's more adjustable, kind of like a mountain bike, being able to raise or lower the seat height on your mountain bike. I think it's pretty awesome that Honda took this into consideration, because that's a pretty good difference between 34.3 and roughly 32 inches. So that's a pretty good seat height difference just straight from the factory. Guys, again, this has been a really quick kind of comparison video, and I've tried to go over the basics and the highlights of both bikes. The one thing that I do want to stress, and this is something that I read in a magazine article recently over the last month or so, is one of the things about the KLR, and the KLR has been known for a long time as probably one of the best adventure bikes ever made. And here, what the author actually said was, you've got to look at it like this. For the price of a brand new KLR, well, let me back up. For the price of a brand new Honda Africa Twin, you can actually buy 2 brand new KLRs. And what that means in a real world sense is you could buy 2 KLRs, drive one of them, ride it off of a cliff, and you've still got another brand new bike. So that is something to be said about the KLR. I mean, it's going to be hard to beat the value of the KLR. It is a good bike. Like I said, the bike is built well. It's a great balanced bike. It's a great bike for a beginner. It's very forgiving. You're not going to accidentally loop that bike out if you get hung up in some rough terrain. I just don't picture it happening. And that is it could be a real world scenario for the Honda Africa Twin. It has so much horsepower. I could see where a guy could get in trouble. If your skills are not up with the horsepower of that bike, you could get yourself in a position where you loop the bike out. So that's something to be said about the KLR. I believe it's a good solid bike. Like I said, it's a good all-around bike. It doesn't do one thing great, but it does everything okay. And there's a lot to be said about that. I believe the more I own the Honda Africa Twin, the better I'll be able to give you a more in-depth review on how well it does off-road. We have not been off-road a whole lot on the Africa Twin yet, but it will happen. Guys, I appreciate you tuning in to Heartland Dual Sport. If you like our video, give us a big thumbs up. If you know anybody that's interested in maybe the KLR and or the Honda Africa Twin, and they're maybe trying to decide which bike they want to go with, please share our videos with them and send them over to our channel. We're going to have a bunch more videos on the Honda Africa Twin. Bottom line, guys, I do want to make this one final point before we end out the video is, as you guys know, one of the things that I always say at the very beginning of my videos is, let's go ride. Everybody has a different budget. And if you can afford the KLR, I would say get it. You're going to be extremely happy with the bike. One thing that I know to be true is both days were happy days for me. The day that I brought my KLR home, I was extremely excited. The day I rode my Honda Africa Twin home, I was extremely excited. More than anything, guys, let's get out and go ride. And as always, we appreciate your likes, comments, and subscribes, and may you have a blessed week.